Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be covering the surprising upset by Democrats in Alaska's at-large special election. Democrat Mary Peltola has beaten Sarah Palin, the former vice presidential candidate in 2008 and former governor of Alaska, the first Democrat to win this seat since the early 1970s. So really big news coming out of Alaska. We'll be taking a look at why this ended up happening, how Alaska's vote system actually works, and ultimately why Sarah Palin lost to Mary Peltola and what's likely to happen in November, because these same candidates are going to be on the November ballot as well, plus a libertarian in fourth place. So we're going to get into all of that in just a second, but first, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing down below and liking this video if you enjoy. It is now September. We're officially in full general election season, so I'll be uploading nearly daily on this channel, but I can't do it without your support. So anyway, let's get straight into it. So Mary Peltola defeated Sarah Palin by about 5,000 votes. Now, there were 177,000 votes cast, and Sarah Palin only got 85,000 votes. Now, if we take a look back at the election, first off, we had a jungle primary for this seat. After Don Young passed away earlier this year, a special election was triggered. The jungle primary had Sarah Palin winning with 27% of the vote, Begich second at 19% of the vote, Al Gross in third at 12%, Mary Peltola at fourth place with just 10%. So these four candidates then advanced to the general election, which was held a couple weeks back. Of course, if we take a look at the results at that, we only had three candidates, though, on the ballot. Al Gross dropped out shortly after winning in the jungle primary. This was probably a strategic move on the part of the Democrats because he was sort of in the way of Peltola being able to win. And, had that not happened, possibly Al Gross could have won, but you could have also seen Palin eke out a victory as well. So it would have been very interesting, this dynamic, if Al Gross had actually stayed in the race. But nonetheless, he dropped out, and Begich, Palin, and Peltola advanced to the general. Now, Begich came in third place. He was eliminated. He got 27.8% of the vote. Sarah Palin came in second at 30.9% of the vote, and Peltola in first at 39.6%. Now, then you go to the second ballot because of the ranked choice voting system, which then has just Palin and Peltola. And of course, those results had Peltola winning 51.5% of the vote to Palin's 48.5%. Now, one of the reasons why Palin lost this race is because she was a very unpopular candidate. And that's an objective fact. That's not opinion. She left office as governor as a very unpopular political figure. Of course, she left to go run for vice president with John McCain. A lot of people saw her as abandoning the state of Alaska. There were a number of other things she also did to sort of anger the Republican base. She actually endorsed Bill Walker back in 2014, the independent candidate against an incumbent Republican governor, and ultimately that independent ended up winning. A lot of people weren't too happy about that. There were a couple of other things she had done in office as well that sort of angered a large segment of the Republican base, and ultimately it's why a lot of Begich voters did not rank Palin as their second choice. Had they done that, had all of the Begich voters put Sarah Palin as their second choice, Sarah Palin would have won the second round with about 62% of the vote. So that's a huge difference than the result we actually ended up getting. And it's mainly because a lot of people left the second ballot blank. A lot of Palin voters didn't put Begich as their second choice and vice versa. And one of the reasons for that was a pretty ugly campaign between these two candidates. I think a lot of people didn't expect the Democrat to actually pull off a victory. They saw it more of as a two-way race between a Republican and a Republican. And as a result, Palin and Begich kind of focused a lot of their energy on attacking each other and not attacking Peltola. And that's one of the reasons why I think she was able to squeak by and win this victory. Again, she's the first Democrat to hold this seat since the early 1970s. It's no small feat, to say the least. A big reason of it is the fact that the Republicans were too busy infighting and ultimately didn't get their act together. Now, despite this victory by the Democrats, Alaska is still a very Republican state. Donald Trump won the state by about 10 points back in November of 2020. Dan Sullivan won by over 12 points. So this is not a state that's a swing state by any means. This is a very Republican state. And as the primary results and the first round results tell us, Republicans did exceptionally well. They massively outperformed both Trump and Dan Sullivan's margin in the state, but it wasn't enough to get them over the top. So, you know, one of the reasons why this was such a loss for Republicans is because they were too busy fighting each other. And now Peltola will go to Congress as an incumbent, and we're going to have another election with these same candidates plus a libertarian in November. Now, one of the biggest fears for the Republicans is that Sarah Palin and Begich stay in the race until November, and ultimately the same thing ends up happening. The Begich voters don't vote for Palin, and the Palin voters don't vote for Begich. And as a result, Peltola could end up winning a full term to the U.S. House. And I think that's very possible if Palin or Begich does not drop out, one or the other. Honestly, I think Begich is probably the stronger candidate at this point. Though he did lose in the first round, he doesn't have nearly as high of a disapproval rating as Sarah Palin. In fact, many of the one-on-one polls against Begich and Peltola had Begich winning. Those same polls, of course, had Peltola beating Sarah Palin. So I think Begich objectively is the stronger candidate for the Republicans. I don't know if Sarah Palin is going to drop out or Begich is going to drop out. Ego is a very powerful force in politics, but nonetheless, you know, this is really a situation that Republicans were really hoping to avoid. But ultimately, due to Alaska's ranked choice voting system, we very well could see Peltola actually hold on to this seat, despite November expected to be still a better year for Republicans than at least 2020. But that's not the position the GOP really wants to be in. Now, ultimately, in November, you might have more of the Begich voters willing to put Palin as their second choice and vice versa. But again, that's really an if rather than a certainty. But Peltola is now the incumbent, and she now will have a couple of months to kind of establish a record for herself. And, you know, a lot of funding is going to come her way now. Now that Democrats have actually cracked through, they've broken through in Alaska for the first time in a really long time. Alaska has always been a historically Republican state. So now that Democrats have an incumbent in this seat, it's really more of a symbolic victory. They're going to want to try and put money to keep Peltola in this seat. So expect a lot of money to rush into Alaska, at least relative to the amount of money people usually put in the state of Alaska. Alaska ultimately really doesn't get thought of much when we think about national politics, but this is a big victory for the Democrats nonetheless. Even if Republicans ultimately were their own worst enemy, Democrats still picked up a House seat, at least for a couple of months. Now, going into November, a lot of these predictions I expect to change. You have a lot of people putting this as solid, likely, or lean R. It really is a toss-up at this point unless one of the two Republicans drops out of the race. Now, of course, I think it's better for Republicans if Palin drops out of this race, but you're going to hear arguments from the other side as well. Ultimately, Peltola could end up winning because of the same vote split, because of the ranked choice vote system. You know, had the Republicans and Democrats held separate primaries and you had a general election, it's very possible that Palin would have won this race, or, you know, she could have lost on her own merit as well. Like I said, Palin is a very unpopular candidate. I think she was a poor choice for Donald Trump to endorse in terms of a candidate that could actually win, especially given these results. I don't know if Donald Trump is going to backtrack or sort of soften his support of Palin. If anything, you know, knowing Trump, he'll probably double down even harder behind Palin, and I think that is likely to really hurt the Republicans in November. So again, this really doesn't have much to do with the whole red wave versus blue wave sort of scenario. I really think this is more of Republicans just shooting themselves in the foot in a very winnable race. So again, things are sort of starting to change for Republicans. Things are sort of moving into their favor, you know, in Pennsylvania and Georgia. And we'll talk about Georgia in tomorrow's video. I actually have a video about that because Warnock is now starting to slip in some polls, and we're sort of seeing a little bit of the energy change. The RCP average Republicans are back up again for the first time in about a month or so. So a lot of things are changing. Labor Day is coming up. We're going to start seeing a lot more accurate polling coming out about the midterm elections, but really we're in full general election season. So again, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe down below. We're going to be uploading almost daily now with election predictions and analysis videos. And of course, if you're a recurrent viewer, stay tuned for that because we will have a lot more content coming out. We'll hopefully be able to live stream potentially the New Hampshire primary results. That's really the last big primary to pay attention to this cycle. After that, there's really not a whole lot going on. That's the end of primaries, and we're really fully in general election mode. The November midterms are literally a little bit over 2 months away. I think we're about 9 weeks and some change away from the midterm election. So we've got a whole lot to cover before then. So stay tuned for that. But anyway, that's really it in terms of my analysis of the Alaska results. I think Peltola could potentially win in November if this same vote split occurs. It's really up to the Republicans, I think, to kind of get their act together. And, you know, Democrats are going to take a moral victory on this. They flipped a seat that has been red since the 1970s. So truly a big victory for the Democrats and a big disappointment for the Republicans. So anyway, that's it for today's video. Please leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel. And as always, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.